Hi guys, so we're going to tutorial some hip openers today, and I was inspired to do this video because a couple people, especially in the hot yoga world, especially in the Bikram world, when you're subject only to the 26 and 2 poses, they feel that their hips are not getting enough workout, not getting enough range of motion, and a lot of people have been commenting and DMing me and saying, can you give me some hip openers because I feel I need them. So with the help of Senior Barkan Teacher Elena, we're going to demonstrate a couple standing poses first, just as a warm-up, and then we're going to get down to the floor and show you these hip openers that are definitely going to revolutionize your yoga practice. So interestingly enough, in Bikram's advanced class, he does sun salutation and salute to the god and goddesses, which he has the runner's lunge, crescent lunge, and kneeling salute, and that's a great hip opener, especially for the front of the hips, the hip flexors. So I'm going to have Elena come to the back of the mat, and let's have her just go to downward facing dog, which is not in the Bikram sequence, definitely in the Barkan sequence. And I'm going to have her step her right leg through to runner's lunge, which is in Bikram sun salutation and the Barkan sun salutation. Hands on the hips, arms overhead, right knee is directly over the ankle, back leg is straight, and this hip comes back to square the hips. Now I'm going to have Elena switch her legs. Just switch your legs for a second, Elena, please. And you're going to see the stretch that's going to take place in the front of the hip or the hip flexor. So as you lift the hamstring and the heel to the ceiling, it's going to be a great opener for those hip flexors. Part of the sun salutation, runner's lunge, great warm up for those hips. Before we continue, I want to make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Hit the like button, share it with your friends. Any comments or questions or concerns, put them down. I get to all the comments. You want to learn all about hot yoga flows and tutorials, hit the like and subscribe button right now. Now when we get to what's known as crescent pose, but in the Bikram Ghosh world they call it warrior or Virabhadrasana. I like to call it crescent warrior. So I'm going to have Elena go to downward facing dog. And I'm going to have her step her left leg out because you can see it a little bit better. Left leg swings through to crescent warrior, hands on the hips, arms overhead, shoulders down, and she's going to once again square the hips, lift the hamstring and the heel, and this is a great stretch for that right side front hip flexor. That's the front of the hip that we're going to stretch. So make sure the left hip comes back and straighten that back leg as much as you can. Now we move into what I consider to be a really great hip flexor opener. It's the kneeling salute, part of the salute to the god and goddesses, and the salute to the moon. So she drops her right knee down. And what we want to do is stack the joints. Left knee is over the ankle. Now in the Bikram world, they have this heel way too close, in my opinion, to the knee. Do that for a second. So this knee is bending forward. I like the hip more forward, so the knee is over the ankle to stack and protect the joints. And then the right hip on top of the right knee. So we're going to carve out those two 90-degree angles. Interlace the fingers, curl down, touch your head to the knee. Inhale up. Exhale into a back bend kneeling salute, and here's where the stretch is in that hip flexor, right in here. We exaggerate the back bends in hot yoga. She does so beautifully. Keep those arms straight. Hip flexor stretching. It's a great warm up. Now we're going to get to the floor. Now we've magically come down to the floor, and this is really where we're going to concentrate deep into the hips. The hips have all these different areas, front, back, side, 6 different ranges of motion we need to get into and penetrate. The first one's an external rotation, and what we call, and this is an interesting point, what we call gentle pose or Supta Badrasana. She brings the soles of her feet together, the knees flare out. The reason why I say it's interesting, other styles of yoga have a different name for this pose. Some call it Supta Baddha-Konasana. Supta is just reclining. Baddha is bound, Kan is angle, so bound angle pose. We call it Bajra. Bajra was a creation of Shiva, the goddess of the hunt, nicknamed gentle. Some people say, how can she be gentle if she's the goddess of the hunt? I don't know. I didn't make it up. So the knees open out, and this is the external rotation of the hips. You can bring your feet up as close as you can to the crotch area as possible, and a little help, you can take your hands right in here and press into the inner thighs and just breathe. Get the back of the neck on the floor and breathe. If you're not able to get the feet all the way up like Elena is able to, you can bring your feet back a little bit. That's a modification. Bring it back in for a second. But this is a great posture to soften the hips. And we hold this one in the Barkan class for a longer period of time so the connective tissue has a chance to release and to respond. Has a chance to, because what happens is the connective tissue starts to fatigue. So as it fatigues, it opens up into a great range of motion. So the last hip pose that I do on a daily basis in the Barkan world, definitely not in the Bikram world, definitely a very beneficial pose to open out those hips. Ikapada, one-legged, Kapotasana, pigeon pose. So from downward dog, you don't have to do it in downward dog, but the right leg sweeps the sky. You're going to swing the right leg through to the right corner of the mat so the hips are square. So the knees pointing to the right side. Now, some people have really tight hips, and it hurts the right knee. So a great modification is to take a block and stick it right underneath the buttocks cheek. So she's going to stick on that, stick it right underneath there. Now, if she brings her head to the floor, if that block is by her hip, bring her head all the way down. She's off balance. She's not even. We want her hips and her head in the same line. So take another block and put it right at your head, and now you've evened out. Let me show you another example of how the block can help really tight hips. We're going to do a little B-roll and show you another pose real quick. So here's a little sidebar note. If you're sitting in a posture, what we call Sukhasana or easy pose, Elena's got really flexible hips, so her knees and her hips are in the same line. She could sit here for a long period of time. But people with really tight hips, especially men, their knees lift up in the air because their hips are so tight. So this is why the block can be so beneficial. If I have that tight person, not necessarily Elena, but we're just imagining Elena's hips are tight for a second, and she sits on the block. Now what she's done is she's brought her knees and her hips at the same level. Because it's not the knees that's the issue, it's the hips. The hips are tight, the knees are going to take the brunt of the hips. So that's why sitting on a block positions and creates an evenness between the hips and the knees, takes all the pressure off the knees. So definitely try this at home. That's why it's great to sit on a meditation pillow if your knees are sticking up in the air and they're an issue. So we've magically gone back into pigeon pose, and I've magically switched her legs to the other side because I want to show you the position of the feet. So come up for a second, Elena. That left foot, for most people, is going to be really close to the hip. But if you're more flexible, and if you're a little more advanced and open in your hips, you can take that foot and bring it forward toward the front mirror. All the way up, all the way up, all the way up. Yep, so that shin is parallel. And eventually you can bring the foot even further out than that, past the parallel line, but that's just an extreme amplification. For most people, the foot's going to be back by the hip, so bring it back by the hip. And now she goes down into the pose and just softens and breathes. And once again, this is a pose we hold for a long period of time to give the connective tissue a chance to soften. It actually fatigues and then it lets go. Wonderful position. The eyes closed. We enter Patanjali's fifth limb of Pratyahara, the HOT Yoga's fourth path, Pratyahara, to withdraw from the senses. So now is a great hip opener, but at the same time, we're really going within because we're closing the eyes. Ikapada, Kapotasana, do it every day. So that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Hit the like button, subscribe button. Any comments and questions, put them down below. I get all the comments. You will learn all about hot yoga. Hit the subscribe button right now. And we'll see you the next video. Bye, everyone.